Fighting games gotta be one of the most important genres of today, to be honest. It actually makes up at least 1/6 of like most of the genres out today. And to be honest, the impact that they had over the years is just mind blowing. And you got your 2D side scrolling, you got your, the guy walks around and beats it out of everybody. But then you get 3D fighters. And in specific, if you lived in the early 2000s, the game that I'm going to be talking about today, you had to be living under a rock if you haven't heard about it. It had, terrible live action movies, it had remakes and, of course, additionals, you name it. But today we're going to look at exactly how a game fell to the greed of the company itself. And today we're going to actually take a look at Dead or Alive. Now, Dead or Alive is a fighting game that came out back in 1996 for the arcades, and actually a few years later on for the consoles, Sega Saturn if I'm being mistaken. And just like what I was saying earlier, Dead or Alive in the early 2000s was huge, because when you think of majority of the 3D fighter games that are out there, you're going to think of Tekken, you're going to think of Soul Calibur, and then instantly you're going to think about either Dead or Alive or its predecessor, Virtua Fighter. But I'm not going to count Virtua Fighter because, it runs like... Dead or Alive is such a unique fighting game because not only does it make use of the idea of ninjas, the idea of fighters across the world, but also appeal. But we're not going to dive too much into that. We're going to sidestep right past it. The game centers around a clan of ninja known as the Mugen Tenshin clan, who's pretty much in cahoots with the other clans, along with basically, run-ins and rivalries and world domination, everything that just makes anime cool. Personally, one of the biggest marketing points to this game is the fact that it actually shares an IP with another legendary series known as Ninja Gaiden. Now, for anybody that doesn't know what Ninja Gaiden is, think of Devil May Cry or any of those PS2 looking ass games and just add ninjas. Yeah, basically Ryu Hayabusa is one of the cleanest ninjas probably in gaming history. Allow me to further elaborate on the actual story though that's going on. The Tenshin clan, as I stated earlier, is a hidden ninja sect who main character Kazumi and older brother Hayate resides from. And out of majority of the members of the Mugen Tenshin clan, there was one that wound up disbanding in search for power. His name's Raito. His whole mission was to obtain the sacred move called the Sky Torn Blast, if I'm not mistaken, which is basically a giant ki blast or a Kamehameha, whichever you want to state it. Even Ryu has one, but we're not going to go into that one. But point is, a fierce battle actually commences between Hayate and Raito, where Hayate actually winds up getting his back broken. And something I forgot to mention, Ayane, the character with the purple hair that everybody knows and loves, she actually technically belongs to a different ninja clan. But the thing is, because of Raito coming back to the village, something wound up happening that's a little too, but point is, she was conceived and resents Kazumi because of her royal treatment. And after that battle, basically Kasumi sets out to avenge her older brother in his absence. Now, Dead or Alive is like any other tournament fighting game, where you basically fight an enemy, you get to the next stage, you get to the final boss, and I guess you get an ending. But the thing that makes Dead or Alive so cool is the fact that the Dead or Alive tournaments is run by a company named Doatech. Tech's whole mission is basically to craft a super soldier using the best genes from fighters across the planet. And majority of the fighters just happen to come from the Mugen Tenshin clan. And one of them specifically we just talked about, Raito. So after basically Kasumi enters the tournament, meets some new foes and friends along the way, basically she finally catches up to Raito and actually winds up besting him, surprisingly, because Raito was supposed to be the clan leader at one point, but he defected in pursuit of power. Now, after the events of the first game, Hayate actually awakes from his coma, and he actually pursues a different identity known as Ein. And also, just like what I was saying at the start of the video, yes, Ryu Hayabusa is a definite role in this game. He serves as not only a mentor, but kind of like a superhero even amongst the other ninjas, and also inspiration. Ryu actually has a sole mission in the second game where he's actually supposed to encounter the Tengu at the end of the game, but Dead or Alive still has its side stories. And yes, there's more characters than just ninjas and Ryu Hayabusa. Of course, there's Jen Lee, you got, your basic martial artists. You got Brett Wong, Drunken Master. You got Christy, I believe she does grappling. And then, you also got Zack, who just basically is meant to just piss you off. But these characters, just like as I mentioned in another video before, check out that retrospective, most characters have their own set of goals and adventures and things that they do outside of the premise of the game, which is fine by me, but the game knows how to actually balance both to an extent, because really cool that I noticed about this game, specifically the second and third game, they had these cutscenes that, was all the story you needed. And this is something cool most of these OG fighter games used to do, where they didn't explain too much in the manuals or give you a giant tutorial. You watched a few cutscenes, you seen a few images, and you knew what happened from there. But back to the topic, basically Ryu winds up slaughtering the Tengu, of course like usual, but then you find out that the person that actually hired the Tengu was none other than Ayane's parent foster father, who hails from a intersect of the Mugen Tenshin Hajimon. Piggybacking off the last previous titles, the story actually winds up continuing on, but except for the Hajimon ninja named Genra, who's also Ayane's foster father, actually winds up getting possessed by something. And at this point, basically all the stories are trying to intertwine, because at this point Hayate, he's full-fledged committed to being the 18th head clan member, sorry. Basically, of course, Ayane is still, of course, pursuing Kasumi, trying to bring her back. And then, of course, you got Ryu Hayabusa, who's overseeing the whole thing. But Genra, in his Omega form specifically, is a threat that may be too much just for the normal clan members, yet again. With the team up of Hayate, Ayane, and Ryu Hayabusa's intervention, Genra was actually defeated, and Ayane took up his mask and donned herself the new Tengu. After Ayane's resolve, she started to look at Kasumi as more of a rivalry than more of betrayal. And at this point as well, the Mugen Tenshin clan is definitely tired of Dootech, so they proceed to pull an assault on the company themselves by infiltrating and getting to the bottom of what's going on. We find out that the same company that wound up hiring Raido to betray his village is also the same company that caused Genra to go out of control. So within majority of the fight-in and majority of the commotion, we start to find out that Kasumi was in the process of being cloned over 100 times. The thing that makes it kind of crazy is the fact that these clones had the fighting capabilities of everybody that Dootech associates with, meaning in the clan, outside the clan, and basically majority of the fighting styles across the planet. But just like before, with Kasumi, of course Ayane and Hayabusa and Hayate's intervention, the Dootech's building wound up coming to a close, and from this point on, the ninjas thought that they actually were done with all of it. But then we find out that it's just one of many projects. Now we actually come to the fifth game, my most beloved one. And this game was a different gem, but it still follows the same Dead or Alive story, of course, because as you know, Dootech is still doing Dootech things, and we find out that there is a hidden project where at this point they have to end it once and for all. So of course, with the normal clone Kasumi running around acting like the real Kasumi, there's a lot of mix up and scrimmages here and there, but it gets to the point where eventually the jig is up and they start to realize that this is not our Kasumi. So eventually down the road, they fall for the trap of showing up to Dootech just to be experimented on. And at this point, the situation became dire as even Ryu Hayabusa was having some struggle here. So he sends off a message crow to the real Kasumi, who's heading off at Muramasa's shop. Yes, the same Muramasa from Ninja Gaiden. The real Kasumi basically sets out to end Alpha once and for all. And yes, I know it's ironic. Alpha for Kasumi, there's Project Omega for Genra, and then they tried Project Epsilon for Hayate. Hopefully, of course, just like usual, Kasumi was actually triumphant, and they actually successfully wound up blowing up Doatech probably once and for good, until we reach the 6th game. I'm gonna really go too much into this one because this is the one I will admit that I did not pay attention to that also warranted this video. Because in Dead or Alive 6, somehow I don't know how Raito comes back. The reasons for why, I still am not sure. But just like before, Kasumi, Ayane, and Hayate take down Raito, and each have their own branching stories to go from, and right now the story is just in limbo. We got the story out the way. You're probably wondering why I probably made this video and probably made this title. Well, it's pretty clear. 4th Dead or Alive game, the series wanted to take a more realistic approach and, garner towards the competitive. I know it's going to take a minute to actually wind up getting used to it, but somehow it actually wound up translating well. And the thing about Dead or Alive 5 that makes it such a unique game is it held all the core values of what made the other games really fun, like tag team matches, cool combos, guest characters, costumes. But that's the thing, costume. People will give this game a lot of flack for the fact that it's majority DLC and very little content. And the development of this game in specific was kind of a random one because there's Dead or Alive the original, there's Dead or Alive Ultimate, there's Dead or Alive Last Round, and there's Dead or Alive Core Fighters. The problem with all these different re-releases, the thing is, in order to play majority of these characters, if you didn't own the game, good luck, you're spending close to thousands of dollars. Yes, thousands. And the Dead or Alive series, Itagaki wound up actually leaving the company due to reasons. Let's just put it like that. And it's actually why the games went from the style of 1 through 4 until you get to 5 and 6. Obviously, defend Dead or Alive 5 because at its core gameplay, it's phenomenal. The combos, the resets, everything about the game is really clean. And the fact that they actually added virtual fighter characters to the game tells you everything that you need to know and love. At the same time, virtual fighter characters aren't going to make this game any much better than what it is. Because, yes, at a fundamental level, and majority of every case that I can think about, Dead or Alive is a solid fighter. But these price practices made people look at it and turn the opposite direction. Because I'll admit, I first played Dead or Alive 5 on the Xbox One or the 360, I cannot remember. But the point is, majority of the characters were always locked behind a paywall, which I can understand at first because you had your core fighters, the main Mugen Tenshin clan. However, costumes, money. You want story, money. You want lore, money. You want gallery, money. And these practices are the same reason why Mortal Kombat 11 is the one that I skip over along with 12. Because these practices in themselves, like the core audience already knows that, yes, the companies need money. Yes, we understand that making games are hard. Yes, we understand these costumes are cool and deserve to be rewarded. But what we don't like is when the game's whole identity becomes that. Live, like no other, had the same appeal that Tekken and Soul Calibur had in these early 2000s. The reasons that these games were always slapping was the fact that the core game, everything was there. The Ultimate Edition, you had extra costumes that weren't directly sent over to us because we have arcade releases. And that's the thing though too, you can tell that the company actually really cared. This one layup fact, the fact is, majority of the Dead or Alive stages can be found in majority of the Ninja Gaiden games. But I just want to leave y'all with that. To the topic though, the reason why I really hold this sentiment to the fact of, yes, players, even if we do have to spend a lot of money on a game, if the game is giving us a reward for our efforts to keep the game alive, then yes, the game will stay immortal. We never will bat an eye at Tekken for who they throw in there, 9 times out of 10. or usually the type of game that they're giving us, even if it feels like the previous title. And why Tekken remains at the top is because it never left the soul that started the game to begin with. Tekken is always going to be known as a bombastic, fun game where you get your characters, you fight, you learn your cool combos, you argue a little bit with your friends, and you move on to the next game. It knows what it is, it doesn't try to stray away from it, and it solidifies itself. Dead or Alive was on the same pathway until these price practices made friends of mine single-handedly look at the game and go, I'm not paying for that, I'm gonna go play Tekken. And that's the sad thing of where you can see a company going from for the players to give us money. Alright, please do not take this video as just a rant. This is actually just more of a passionate video on one of my favorite games and seeing it just, not be what it used to be. Because I'll leave you with this gem right quick. Dead or Alive is still in that category of immortal games where, yes, if you play 1 through 5, regardless, I'll even give you 1 through 6. You can play every single title and enjoy it. It's up to you personally. But, us longtime fans, we can see when these companies are starting to push more into a competitive scene, but losing their identity slowly. And surely enough, the same thing that I witnessed happen to Halo Infinite is the same thing that I feel like it's happening to Dead or Alive 6, because I might make a video on this, but Tekken remains at the top of the fighting games in 3D era in specific for a few main reasons. But the first reason that players will always go to is how much fun that they're having and how much care that they put into this game to make sure we were having fun. But besides so, Dead or Alive is a must-have hidden gem. If you haven't played it, please play it. And even if you do play it, play Ninja Gaiden right after, and you'll see exactly why I was gushing over this game. But I don't know, this is a cool, fun video for y'all. So y'all take it easy. It's Fireproof Hell, and I'll catch y'all in the next video.